Okay, everybody ready?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jim DeSimone. I'm a civil rights attorney. I've been a civil rights attorney in the city of Los Angeles for over 40 years. I'm here with my legal team, Carmen Sabater, Ryan Hall, and we're here on behalf of Nick Stern, and he's here with his wife, Michelle. And today we filed a claim on behalf of Nick Stern against the County of Los Angeles because the County of Los Angeles, during the protests in the Paramount Compton area, shot an explosive device at Nick Stern in his immediate vicinity. And when it exploded, a casing came off of it and ricocheted, rocketed into his leg 3 inches deep. And it had to be surgically removed. And this use of force is excessive, it's unnecessary, and it's emblematic of the problems with the County of Los Angeles and the City of Los Angeles in the way they've responded to these protests. We call on the City of Los Angeles, the LAPD, Mayor Bass, the County of Los Angeles, the County Board of Supervisors. Get your police departments under control. They are shooting these less lethal projectiles into crowds in order to do disbursement of the crowd against their policies, against the United States Constitution, and in violation of an injunction that prohibits them from shooting them into a crowd. And what happens when these are shot into a crowd, Nick Stern is one example of what happened, and we're going to explain a little more on that, but we have numerous individuals who are contacting us each and every day with brain bleeds, traumatic brain injuries, broken facial bones, broken noses, eye injuries. It's just not stopping, and it's so unnecessary. These people that have been shot, they pose absolutely no threat of harm at the time they're shot, and that's key. The only way these less lethal, so-called less lethal munitions, no one seems to have died yet, but we're waiting, so-called less lethal munitions, the only way they're supposed to be used is target specific when someone is posing an imminent threat of harm to the officers or others. Not when they're out there protesting, even if they're shouting, even if they're waving a flag, even if they're waving a Mexican flag. They're not the enemy. That doesn't mean you get to shoot them. And on June 7th, in Compton, California, Nick Stern was one of those people. Not as someone who is protesting, although I think he has strong feelings on some of these issues, but he's there as a photojournalist. Nick is a world-renowned photojournalist. His work has been published in Newsweek, the New York Times, CNN, every NBC, ABC, The Guardian, Time Magazine, the list goes on. And he believes it's very important when these events go on to document it, and through photojournalism. And on June 7th, when the people of Compton and Paramount objected to ICE agents in their neighborhood because they've been going through the neighborhood, arresting people at businesses, tearing mothers away from their children, fathers away from the children, Nick went to photograph and document that protest. Nick was there for hours. He worked in the vicinity of peaceful protesters and people exercising their First Amendment rights, shouting, waving flags. And at the time right before this incident, there was a line of Los Angeles County sheriffs, their lights on bright, shining themselves at the protesters. And Nick was with a group of at this point, about 9 o'clock, it was just shortly before 9 p.m. on that Saturday night, of about 15 protesters. Shouting at the police, shouting really for the rights of their families. And to the left, about 40 feet away, there were some individuals behind a barricade, and they were throwing fireworks. And what happened was you have the LA County sheriffs who, in response to that, are indiscriminately shooting these less lethal projectiles. And Nick was out in the open. He's got a big camera. He has a press conference. A press pass. The way Nick does his job is he holds up his press pass so that everyone can see him walking, that he's not a threat, that he's press. And he makes himself known to law enforcement. don't target me. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm just here to photograph what's going on. And despite the fact that he was doing that, as he was standing up, and you could see on a video, an explosion takes place close to where Nick is standing, and as soon as that explosion goes off, you could see Nick grab his leg in pain and limp off. He was no threat to anyone at that time. Now, Los Angeles County Sheriffs have policies prohibiting this type of action. But not only do they have policies, we have a copy of an injunction, a preliminary injunction that was signed in United States federal court that guides Los Angeles County. The attorneys who got that injunction have been calling me off the hook because they want declarations. The County of Los Angeles is in contempt of this preliminary injunction by the way they use these less lethal projectiles. And the preliminary injunction says that the only way you can use these less lethal munitions is if the person is causing an actual threat of imminent harm. They're a threat to the officers or to others. Nick Stern didn't pose that threat. And the policy goes on to talk about, or the injunction, that they shall not be used. When you've got these flashbang grenades, these explosive devices, they shall not be used deliberately aimed to strike individuals. They're supposed to be shot up in the air, not at someone like Nick Stern. And when you look at the wounds, and some of you probably can't show this on television, but the object that embedded in Nick Stern's leg was 3 inches long. And that photograph of his wound there, that some of you won't be able to show on television because of how gruesome it looks, that plastic casing is inside his leg at the time that photo is taken. It had to be surgically removed. Nick says the doctors at Long Beach Memorial Hospital, where he eventually were great. They removed it from his leg. They performed surgery. He will describe what he felt, but in speaking with Nick, who I have just the utmost respect for, the work that he does, he says he's never felt a pain like this. It was excruciating. He has limitations walking. He's on crutches today, and he's going to require rehabilitation. So we have filed a government tort claim today. That's the first step before we file a civil rights lawsuit. The shooting of these projectiles into individuals, not only does it violate the injunction, it violates the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution that should be protecting all of us against unreasonable searches and seizures. And it protects the First Amendment. Nick Stern should enjoy the freedom of the press as all of you do. We have freedom of speech and we have the right to peacefully assemble. And LA County Sheriffs and LAPD should be projecting that right. And we have seen time and time again, Nick Stern is the first of many stories that have become prominent. But over these past week in the protests in the city of Los Angeles, they've been shooting these less lethal projectiles in a reckless manner, causing life-altering injuries. And what is also disturbing is they appear to be targeting journalists. They seem to be going after journalists, and we've seen the Australian reporter. I spoke with a Danish reporter yesterday that was shot. There's lawsuits being filed. Individuals who are documenting the excessive force of the Los Angeles Police Department, which should be the bedrock of our democracy and the freedom of press, are being targeted by our LAPD. And people are going to continue to express their First Amendment rights. What's going on right now, where we have federal agents coming into communities, arresting people in schools, nannies taking care of children, people are rightfully saying this is wrong. We do not want ICE in our communities. We do not want armed federal agents with masks in unmarked vans pulling people off the street. So we're going to have a continued expression of their First Amendment rights. And what I've seen, and I follow this closely, is Mayor Bass, someone I have a great deal of respect for, but she's going out, they're blaming the feds, they're blaming ICE, they're blaming all these federal agencies, the National Guard and Marines. No. Now, sure, they're part of the problem, but it's the Los Angeles Police Department, the LAPD, and the Los Angeles County Sheriffs that are using the worst type of force against the individuals who are out there expressing First Amendment rights, rights all of us have as persons within the United States of America. Saturday, June 14th was a beautiful example of that. Hundreds of thousands of people were protesting across the city of Los Angeles in neighborhoods. And when LAPD comes in, they start using force against people, trampling people with horses. One person is blind in their eye. Frankly, Los Angeles County Sheriffs and LAPD, they are out of control. They're breaking the law, they're violating the injunction, they're violating their own policies. And the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department are in contempt of court. They're hurting too many people who are trying to have their voice heard. And as taxpayers, we've heard all year about budget deficits and the amount of liability costs, and this is the problem. They're trying to go up to Sacramento and say, well, let's reduce the amount of money that people can recover in these cases, millions and millions of dollars. How about learning the lessons? There were studies that came out of all the problems with the way in which police responded to the George Floyd protests. All of the people were unnecessarily injured. But there's no accountability. There's no consequences for the people. No one got disciplined for those uses of force. Instead, it's business as usual. We as taxpayers, we foot the bill. After all this evidence of harm, why aren't these deputies better trained and showing restraint? So we need a reset. I call on everyone to protest peacefully, exercise your First Amendment right, and we call on the city and counties to stop attacking people, stop shooting these less lethal projectiles into people such that they're getting brain injuries and head injuries, and in Nick Stern's case, a debilitating injury to his leg that's just still in pain. You know, Nick Stern is courageous. He's dedicated to his craft in his job as a photojournalist. He believes deeply that these events should be documented. And he believes deeply in the First Amendment, the freedom of the press, and the right. When something like this is going on, it's like the press in a war zone. But you don't target the press as has been done here. And when they do, we're going to take them to court. We're filing a lawsuit on behalf of Nick Stern, and we'll file lawsuits, many lawsuits, on behalf of other people who have such serious injuries. I'm teaming up with lawyers across the city. We have no choice. It's the only way we can fight back is through our civil justice system to right this horrible wrong. And we will protect Nick Stern by prosecuting those officers who violated his rights and all of the harm they caused him, because these are life-altering injuries. And here is Nick Stern to my left, and he's going to tell his story. I think I can. I think rolling will probably be easier for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've got my machine with me. I've actually prepared a statement because I'm more comfortable that side of the camera than I am this side, so I'm probably the best way to do it, and then we can talk afterwards. When I went with colleague Tina Desiree Berg down to Compton on Saturday to cover the anti-ICE protests following the raids, I never imagined I would end up that night in hospital with a terrifying and excruciating injury. As a journalist with over 30 years experience, which includes covering protests in Europe, Asia, Africa and the US, I have the benefit of experience which helps me operate safely as possible in a protest zone. It gives me a unique perspective to observe how law enforcement deal with protests also. I've seen some law enforcement deal with protests very effectively. I've seen less effective protests, and some that only can be described as having the appearance of anarchy in uniforms. After the George Floyd protests and the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, There was a universal condemnation of law enforcement and their handling of the events, the strategy, their training, their lack of communication, and possibly more importantly, the danger they pose to the public with their inability to handle their weapons correctly. I could say that nothing's changed, but if I'm honest, from what I've seen the past few weeks, I think it's actually got worse, much worse. The strategy to maintain order at protests, the poor training and awareness, combined with a potentially lethal weaponry, is something that nobody in a civilized state should have to tolerate. Sadly, due to lack of accountability, we don't seem to be learning from our mistakes. It's exactly the lack of accountability, crucial training and preparation that means members of the public and journalists alike are suffering horrific brutalisation at the hands of law enforcement. I was shooting photos of a group of people who were doing nothing more than waving the Mexican flag. In front of them were Sheriff's Department vehicles with their headlights on, and as a photographer, it looked like a compelling image as the flags were illuminated by the headlights. Without any warning, I heard a loud bang and felt a horrific pain in my right thigh. I grabbed my hand down there and I could feel some kind of solid object that appeared to be attached or embedded in my leg. I called out, I'd been hit. I felt cold blood pouring down my leg. Immediately, a group of protesters rushed over to me and physically picked me up and carried me to safety. The whole time, I felt I was going to pass out. The pain was so intense. The medics cut my pants off, applied a trauma dressing to the wound to stem the bleeding. I had a 2-inch hole in the side of my leg. In fact, I did pass out, and they brought me back round. Once taken to ER by my colleague Tina, the realisation of the extent of my injury became apparent. Even the medical staff appeared shocked. This should tell us something. This incident and others like it should bring accountability to law enforcement and the chance to learn how to best protect and serve the public.
Thank you, everyone. If there's any questions, we're willing to answer questions.
Did you receive any kind of warning to disperse, leave the area, anything like that?
I was down in the area of COMPTON from about 3 p.m. up to this incident was 9 o'clock at night, and there were a number of dispersal warnings orders heard. But as a journalist under 409.7, we're there to document. So if people are staying, we need to stay to document what goes on and how, in fact, police deal with that dispersal, which invariably is a single thing which results in most violence, the dispersal order itself.
Was there any reaction from the officers after you were struck?
It was night time. They were about 180 feet away. They were firing so indiscriminately, just volleys of shots towards the protesters for quite considerable time. They're probably unaware if they're actually hitting anything. In fact, on some of the videos, you see projectiles coming with a light trace, like a tracer shot type thing. And these are, it looked like Baghdad, on a bad day.
Were you the only one struck by the law enforcement?
No, there were multiple people struck that day. They're firing a number of devices. Some of them are impact devices, which are a hard foam device, and the idea is it impacts in your soft flesh. It hurts like hell, causes a bruise, nothing more serious. In fact, that's what I first thought was that I'd been hit with, but it had embedded my leg, or at least it had broken the skin and caused the trauma to my leg. If you want to know if more people were hit, just go on social media. It should have its own category now. Day after day, hour after hour, there's people posting almost like battle wounds as souvenirs from these protests.
What is that hit you? What is that thing?
Go ahead.
We believe it's an explosive device with the intention. They're generally termed as flashbangs because that's exactly what they do. They go bang and let off a bright flash. They're intended, from what we can work out, to be fired 20 to 30 feet over a crowd where they explode and hopefully cause people to disperse. But from the video that we have and from the fact that this item hit me, it seems to imply they're pointing these things straight at people, not over their heads.
It just shows how reckless it is that they would be shooting these less lethal projectiles to disperse a crowd. The fact that there's a dispersal order does not give them the right to shoot less lethal projectiles at a crowd that is not threatening them. Again, it has to be target specific against an individual who is posing an imminent threat. And obviously that's not what happened here. So the shooting of that weaponry, the way it was in the vicinity of Nick Stern, it violates the Constitution. We all have the right to be free from excessive force under the Fourth Amendment, and this is excessive force.
Nick, how many journalists were out there, and how many protesters, if you can remember, at that time when you were hit?
It's difficult to answer both of those questions quite simply. You know, these days somebody holding an iPhone up can be a journalist. That, you know, and also what they're doing is journalism, but they wouldn't, you know, call themselves journalists. So it's difficult to tell. Also, in terms of numbers, I was at one location. I was aware there were a larger group further up the road, so I can't tell. It was night time by the time this incident happened. But certainly early in the day there'd been several hundred protesters there, but I think it had dwindled a bit and then more people had come. But certainly the area I was in, there was probably, what would you say, 24 maximum, I guess.
I'm going to ask the devil's advocate question because police have been saying, and I don't know about this particular one, I wasn't there, I haven't talked to anyone from the Sheriff's Department, but the LAPD says, you know, during one of the protests, people were throwing Molotov cocktails. I was there a day when people were throwing hammers at the CHP. So they say that they're going after these agitators that are causing violence to them. What is your response? Was anybody doing anything to them?
I've been covering these protests. I got back out there at 2020 to cover protests, and because I could see what was happening to this country. And in that time, I've shot hours and hours and hours of video, thousands of pictures. I have never seen a Molotov cocktail being thrown. I did see on this particular day a man who had a beer bottle in his hand, no wick, no flaming fabric out of it, and apparently no liquid in it, and I did see him and photograph him throwing it. So if the law enforcement are claiming that people are throwing items which could be used to make a Molotov cocktail, i.e. a beer bottle, well then they're right, but it's still not a Molotov cocktail, is it?
Well, they're not saying it was this incident, it was a separate incident.
I've certainly not seen that and witnessed
Is
that
your
myself.
lawsuit a civil suit, and if so, what kind of damages are you seeking?
Well, I'm going to address that question, and I'm going to address that question. If there are individuals who are throwing things like a hammer at the police, they can use less lethal projectiles to assist in arresting that person. There's no question about it. So, I've heard the LAPD police chief talk about that and say, hey, there's agitators in the crowd. We're for the free speech. Arrest the agitators. Go after the agitators in terms of what they're doing, throwing things at the police. But that does not give the LA County sheriffs carte blanche to shoot into crowds where you have peaceful protesters. This has been litigated over and over again. I mean, from the Democratic National Convention in the 2000, we had the May Day protests in 2007. It's over and over again that they say they're going to do better. They understand that you cannot do this to shoot indiscriminately into crowds. And as soon as you have people out there protesting, you have one person throw a water bottle or something, they think they can unleash on the crowd. And that is just wrong. We are filing a civil rights lawsuit. The damages that we will be seeking is compensation for Nick Stern's physical pain, his emotional anguish, the medical bills that he's incurred because of this, if there's a loss in any business opportunities for him. But ultimately, our main goal is to get justice and hold the officers and the Los Angeles County accountable, because they appear to have a policy pattern and practice of violating these rights. And we're going to do everything we can to put their feet to the fire. So we will cooperate with the attorneys who have the injunction and use this also in addition to our lawsuit to have Los Angeles County held in contempt of court for treating people like Nick Stern this way.
So are you planning a criminal suit as well?
No, I mean that we can't do that. The old and you know it's interesting. I mean, I had a meeting for one of our cases with the new district attorney, but we're civil lawyers. We have no power to file criminal charges against any officers. The only people who can file criminal charges are, you know, the California Attorney General's office. We know nobody's going to file it with the U.S. Attorney's office. That's for darn sure. Or the district attorney here in Los Angeles. We don't expect that. The only way we're going to get accountability is through our civil justice system and holding them accountable in the way that we know how to do.
Nick, were you rolling when this happened?
Sadly not on video, because my video camera battery had just died probably 5-10 minutes before. I was taking stills, but there's video out there that people sent to me showing the moment I was hit, and you can clearly see an explosion 2 or 3 feet next to me, and almost a nanosecond I then grabbed my leg. And
Did it explode in your leg?
no, fortunately it didn't. I mean, it wasn't until we kind of realised what the device was that I was in a hospital bed, and that really kind of gave me so much of a panic attack, the fact that it could have exploded in my leg, you know, a millisecond later. The pain was excruciating anyway. Well, you can imagine a 3-inch by 1.5-inch hard plastic object embedded in your leg. But God, if that had exploded, it would have been, yeah.
So
And
you
that
don't
just-
think he was aiming at you, though?
There's only
Well,
one, but there's only one person who knows if he was aiming at me, and that was whoever pulled that trigger. But there was no reason to aim even around me. There's guys around me who were waving flags, Mexican flags, that they were backlit, so as photographers you all know, that looks pretty impressive. So there was no reason to fire any projectile to general location I was at. Nobody there posed a threat.
This is what happens. The command comes from the top. Less lethal is authorized. But just because less lethal is authorized, they still have to follow their rules of engagement. They can't just use the less lethal projectiles against people who are imposing a threat. So they'll say, okay, we were allowed to file less lethal projectiles. You still got to follow your policies. You still got to follow the rules, and especially when you have an injunction that will show that you're in contempt of court for doing this. So the fact that individuals in the vicinity of Nick Stern, and we have some video that we're sharing. I mean, those folks, there weren't very many of them, and they're waving flags and exercising their First Amendment rights, shouting. That's not a reason to shoot such a dangerous, less lethal projectile in their immediate vicinity. Were they aiming directly at Nick Stern? They got so close to Nick Stern, one might infer that they were targeting him, and as Nick said, the only way we're going to find that out is when we depose that individual, who will probably deny it, but the proof is in the pudding. They know how to aim these less lethal weaponry. They're shot out of a shotgun. It's a 40mm shotgun. The projectile is put into the shotgun, and they're fired. If you're going to fire that into the air, they're supposed to be shooting them at an angle that goes up in the air. The way in which this came where Nick was, it was obviously shot directly at him where he was standing. So we believe he was targeted.
Nick, how far away were they from you? Or
I've kind of measured it on a map looking at the available video we've got and where the Sheriff's Department line was. It appears to be about 180 feet. Now, these exploding projectiles come in a number of options, and you choose whichever distance, 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, depending on how far the crowd are away. So if you've got a crowd 180 feet away, you probably want to grab a 150 feet or 200 feet projectile and fire it over their head. So why were they firing these at waist height to people? And I've got video which shows multiple projectiles being fired directly at people that were doing nothing wrong. I went through some video yesterday. It's taken me kind of 10 days to get the courage to go through it, because it's pretty traumatic, the whole environment which comes back when I look at that. But I've got video of people on motorbikes being fired at, people standing there making gestures with their hand being fired at, people waving flags being fired at. None of these people represent a threat.
Nick, we can all see the physical damage, but can you talk a little bit about the emotional impact?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, that the saddest thing for me was missing Jacob's high school graduation. You know, it's something you look forward to for the whole life of your child. I was in hospital. I had first physical therapy appointment the day before, and I said to the therapist, what do I have to do to you, to show you, to prove I can be released to go to the graduation? So she gave me a list of things, and they were pretty basic things. Walk up and down the hallway outside, turn round, walk back. You've got stairs, 4 stairs that go into your house. You need to be able to get up to 4 stairs and go down 4 stairs. You need to be able to sit in a seat, stand up from that seat, and put a pair of pants on. And I couldn't do it.
If you catch that, Nick's son graduated high school last week. He missed his son's high school graduation because he was in the hospital because of his wound.
So that was emotionally probably the worst thing. But to realise that now, I mean, this is pretty much the first time I've been out of bed since it happened. Michelle, my wife, fortunately, is a wound care nurse. Obviously, you want your partner to care for you, but I would never want her to care for me in that way. So I'm getting the best treatment possible, but it's still, as a family, it's traumatic as well. You know, my son and my daughter have to have this realization that I've got this bad injury now that's going to take considerable time and rehabilitation and medical attention to recover from. You know, it's pretty terrifying.
We've heard that the sheriffs were more aggressive than the PD. Have you guys noticed any difference in that, or is it all in the same, lumped in the same?
But I think the events of Compton that night is probably the most aggressive I've seen either department. But I think it says a lot. If you look at the June the 14th, there's late in the afternoon, I saw a tweet, and it's been reported actually, that the sheriff's department was shouting over their radio, can you stop LAPD firing left lethals, we're being hit. So the two departments, sheriff's department and LAPD, were shooting effectively at each other and hitting each other. Maybe,
I
maybe
think,
now they know how it feels.
You know, I think they're rivaling each other for who's worse. And, you know, you do have to wonder if these guys are showing off because they want to prove to the Marines and to the National Guard, hey, we're tough, we can go out there and hurt people. We don't need you guys to come out here and hurt people, because it does seem to have been ramped up. But if you see some of the footage of what the LAPD did on Saturday, I was contacted yesterday by a woman who was trampled by attorneys who are representing a woman. They've asked me to come on board, who were trampled by horses with LAPD. She's trying to stand up. She stands up, and they just, as she's trying to get away from them, they beat her with batons with those long sticks that they have on the horseback, and they knock her back down again to where she's totally unconscious. They drag her onto the side of the sidewalk and leave her there. I mean, this is appalling. This is absolutely appalling that our police departments are treating human beings like that, who are out there exercising their First Amendment rights. And, you know, there's letters that have been written from the National Lawyers Guild, the ACLU, directly to Mayor Karen Bass, outlining the history of the Los Angeles Police Departments. And this also affects the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, abuse of people protesting, calling on them to stop. There's no response. It's more convenient for them to blame Trump, to blame the feds, instead of taking accountability for our own police departments. And that's what's going on in our city right now.
Now, is this the only less lethal projectiles that they were shooting, or they were shooting?
Well, I emphasise first, I've got one here with me that I actually picked up off the ground. This is not what was shot at me, and not the same type. This is an impact munition. This is what I thought had hit me. The idea of this, it's a hard foam front, and it hits your body, hurts like hell. It makes a big purple bruise for about a week. You know, and gives you a bad leg. So this is what I thought had hit me. So they were firing these, they were flying the flashbangs, the same bore, they're 40mm caliber, and the device that hit me was just slightly longer and a solid plastic shell without this foam cap.
So would you say that they're using different types of less lethal?
Yeah, they have a whole collection at their disposal, including ones filled with pepper, ones filled with paint, these ones, the flashbangs. What else have they got?
LAPD also has super sock round where it's mesh, and inside there are basically metal beads, and they're also shot from a 40mm. LAPD actually patented their super sock round for the maximum impact to take somebody down. But I know, having represented people from the George Floyd protests, that those metal can also be embedded into someone's skin. So it seems as if they've turned to these types of, one might call them rubber bullets. They're foam bullets that they're shooting very often into the crowds. But again, if you get hit in the face at close range or the head, we have several cases where people have, brain bleeds, brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, because they're shooting them indiscriminately into the crowd without targeting protesters. Are not supposed to shoot people in the head, but there are many, many people who have been shot in the head. We have, in addition to Nick Stern, approximately 5 clients who were shot in the head or face by LAPD or LA County Sheriffs this past week.
Who were you working for that day, and can you?
I was doing what I normally do. I work for a lot of British news organisations, but on that day I was actually out there on spec, which means I can then go and get one and often sell it to multiple outlets. So I wasn't actually on an assignment as such for one specific publication, but that's a way in my industry, newspaper, journalism, basically people will work, they'll go out there, shoot the material, and then distribute it after that.
Would you call that freelance?
Yeah. But stuff I've had from these protests have gone to The Guardian, The Telegraph, The Daily Mail, People magazine, what else? Newsweek magazine, CNN. A lot of news organisations have used my material from protests.
Can you spell your first and last name, please?
Sure. First name is Nick, please. Nick. Last name is Stern, Stern.
And to be clear, I'm Jim DeSimone, DeSimone. First name James. And this is our law firm, V. James DeSimone Law, who have prosecuted many of these cases and will continue to do so. I do want to add, for anybody who has Spanish-speaking television, I do have an attorney here who is prepared to give a statement in Spanish. Maybe we could do that in the other conference room if you'd like.
Now, you mentioned you have a video. How can you share that with us?
The video has the video has been put out as part of our press release. If you look at the press release and you click on the link, that video is contained in the assets with that press release.
Is that copyrighted video, or do we have permission to use it?
You have permission to use it. It's not copyrighted.
So we can write courtesy of Jim DeSimone, attorney?
Yes, you can.
Nick, in your experience of covering protests, did that night feel any or seem any different from something you previously covered?
I must say, a lot of protests that I've covered, the strategy that law enforcement here in Los Angeles seem to use seems very ineffective. It seems to create more problems than it solves. If they're firing multiple rounds of less lethal munitions into a crowd, it doesn't seem to disperse that crowd. Sure, that crowd might move half a block or come from another direction. And I think that Saturday night was just a clear example of that it just seemed to be anarchy. So was it any worse than normal? I think it was. Yeah, it's a little bit worse, but not by any huge great degree. I've seen very good strategy where police managed to quash a protest pretty early on, and they take very effective action. Now, surely that's the intention here.
But let's be clear, when Nick says there's anarchy,
that's from law enforcement, sorry.
it's anarchy from law enforcement, not from the people in the crowd. An important distinction.
Yeah, sorry, I should have said that, yeah.
Nick, are you British?
I'm a British American, yeah, I moved here in 2007, became a citizen.
It's important to say.
especially now.
Are these pictures you took?
No, that's from a video that somebody gave to me, which he's an authorised distribution of. That's the device about 2 feet away from me where it explodes. Just to the left of that, you can see a kind of salmon-coloured T-shirt. That was me.
Which one? First, second, third?
Do you want?
That one?
Michelle, are you
That's
able-
No. Do you want me to hobble over there? Okay.
Maybe she could show
Yeah,
it.
Michelle. Do you know which it is?
Here, why don't I just hand this to you?
Yeah, so that's probably
and then
better,
you
isn't it?
can-
Yeah. So this is what I believe is the remnants of the device as it's exploded. Now, the explosion of these devices is very, very short. In fact, if I scroll back on my editor, it's literally 1 frame of the bright flash. So this is a remnants of it, and that is me here. And the device then travels into my leg here. Fortunately, and you'll see this from the video, probably about 3 or 4 seconds before this hit, I turned sideways instead of facing this direction. So it hit me in the side of the leg. I don't even want to think about what would happen if I was face onto that device.
Was it your calf that it hit?
Yes, it's in my calf, yeah.
And then what's the
No, your
third
thigh.
picture? Your thigh.
It's in your thigh.
Oh,
It's not-
sorry.
It's not
Thigh.
in
It's in
his
your
calf.
thigh.
Yeah,
It's in his thigh.
sorry. So in actual fact, this is a
That's
frame
you
of me
hit.
hobbling away immediately after this happened.
Is that
in
blood?
fact, sorry. No, I've got a belt pack on with some lenses in and stuff like that. But sorry, yeah, if you look at this one, this is the guy that was closest to me that was flying a flag. There's another guy here with a flag, and that's me just there. And I was focusing on the guys over here.
But there was blood pouring down his
Yeah.
leg.
You know, when, sorry, the medics, firstly, I called out in pain that I'd been hit. A group of protesters rushed to me, physically picked me up, moved me out of the way, sat me down on the footpath, and by that time a medic had got there. They decided they needed to move me. I said to them, I'm going to pass out. They decided to move me again, so we were shielded by a vehicle that was there, so we weren't likely to get hit by anything else. And the medic, cut my pants off, put some kind of trauma pad on my leg. First chance I had to see it, but I felt, while I was being carried there, I felt this liquid running down my leg, and I thought some of these projectiles have paint in them, so they can identify troublemakers. And on impact, they burst paint over people. So I could feel this liquid running down my leg that I just assumed, oh, it must be some paint or something in the device. But it wasn't until they cut my pants off that I realised it was my own blood. Once the medic had finished applying first aid, I was sitting on the ground and I passed out. I wasn't aware I felt like I was going to pass out, but the only thing I knew was I was being brought back round, which was pretty terrifying. I didn't have a clue where I was and what I was doing there.
Nick, I don't know if you remember that. Did the deputies know they had shot and injured you so bad? Who called the ambulance?
No, there was no ambulance called. Firstly, it's dark, it's nighttime. You'll see from the video that there's a lot of projectiles constantly, flying over. They probably don't even realise they hit something when they do, because they're already reloading and choosing their next target. There was no ambulance called. Fortunately, the team to get me to safety and get the medic there was, if I'm ever in a war zone, they are the guys I would want standing alongside me, because it was so efficient. One guy took my camera, made sure it was safe. One guy, I think I dropped my wallet or something, he had that, made sure it was safe. But they just got a car there and literally carried me into the car, and we sped out to go to the hospital. Yeah.
How many days were you in the hospital?
I was there from Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, and released late Tuesday evening.
4 days.
4 days, yeah.
And the questions about whether there was attention given, they're violating their training by not looking at where they're shooting and the impact of where they're shooting. What's really, again, disturbing is that LA County Sheriffs and LAPD, when they are causing individuals to be badly hurt, they just leave them. They are not providing medical care for those individuals, and not making sure that they don't bleed out on a sidewalk. So, let's hope that the worst doesn't happen in our city, but city leaders have got to take control of this and have it stop, because it's very disturbing that, if it wasn't for the good Samaritans out there and the kindness of others, what could have happened if nobody was around and Nick passes out, bleeding on the sidewalk? There's worst case scenarios. Law enforcement should bear some responsibility here to make sure that they're not causing injuries that are so life-threatening to people, and that they don't have life-threatening consequences because of the failure to provide medical care, which is also their responsibility when they create a harm, to have that medical care provided. None of that is happening with any of the individuals who are injured in these protesting. They are on their own. We are on our own. And we're hoping to partner with the city and county in order to make things better for all of us. But by past experience, it's probably going to take contentious litigation to get some semblance of justice. All right, well, I think we thank everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Can we get a shot of the press pass on the conjunction?
Oh. Which one that?
One you were using.